Lost Private. We're in Normandy.
How's everyone doing? Hey, it's Joe. Um, here at the We're Not Lost Private podcast, doing a quick hit, maybe like a 30-minute here. With the 80th anniversary of Operation Market Garden coming, I figured it'd be kind of cool to do a couple of episode reviews to the relevant episodes in Band of Brothers 4 and 5. Before I went on, I was just taking a look at some of the scripts, and I got to give a shout out to Simon and Leighton and Sean and Chris for sharing some of these early scripts with me. Originally, and we're going to talk about episode 4. Originally, episode 4 was called Personal Effects, and it was originally written by Graham Yost, and then later revised by Bruce McKenna, and then later Eric Bjork came in and did some revisions as well. What's really interesting about it is as you go through the script, and it's only 62 pages long, but it's definitely a departure from what we finally see on the screen, in that it centers around the losses suffered during the initial phases of fighting for Easy Company during Market Garden. Specifically, it focuses on the loss of Miller, obviously portrayed by James McAvoy in the miniseries. They spend quite a bit of time, and it's very, very much focused on the loss of Miller and Webster's role in trying to get Miller's body identified alongside some Graves registration personnel. So again, it's very different from what we end up seeing on the screen. But I wanted to just roll through the episode really quick. I'll probably fast forward through a bunch of portions, but what I did want to do is talk about some of the hits and misses, but mostly just about the general care, as I posted in our newsletter, the general care and handling that the production team and the cast and crew had in terms of how they presented it on screen. And that's going to be a running theme throughout any of these episodic reviews that I do. But we're going to kick it off right now. I'm going to hit play. And obviously we're going through the opening and if you're like me, sorry, grabbing my coffee. If you're like me, the theme song gets you every time. No matter where I am when I hear it, I got to stop. And we're gonna push through it so we can get to some of the scenes, so we can talk about what's going on here for everybody. So obviously the final product is called Replacements. So they interview some of the replacement troopers early on. You see Don King, Mo Alley talking about the replacements. I believe Earl talks about the replacements as well. Les Hashy. Always good to see the boys on screen. Many of them I knew personally. So these are always tough. The episodes are always tough to watch because I do know these guys. Then there's the infamous dart scene. I asked Buck Compton about the scene, and he said, "Yeah, I used to play darts with them. I used to play all kinds of stuff." He's like, "I don't specifically remember any betting going on, nor do I remember using my offhand to throw." He goes, "But it is a great scene because it sets up the tavern scene, the pub scene for the rest of it, and then you have the rookies, McAvoy, Doug Spain, all sitting there talking, and then the sergeants are talking about it, which is hysterical because you have the Tacoma men, the sergeants, and then you have the replacements, and you already see Robin Lang's Heffron character already being kind of accepted as part of the group. And a lot of that had to do when he was assigned to the company right after their return from Normandy. When he checked in with Winters at the company command post in Allborn, Winters is asking him where he's from, and he obviously said South Philly. And Winters basically said, "Well, I got the guy for you," and he assigned him to second platoon with Bill. But the other part about this scene I like is when they talk about the canceled jumps. And if you've watched any of my pods with James Daly, you know about those, especially the most recent one, because those are the those are the jumps he'd be one of the jumps he'd be referring to, and I believe it was a Chartres was the intended drop zone that they refer to. They don't refer to by name in the show, but that's the one they're talking about. But it's a great scene, and I really enjoy it because it sets up the delineation between the Toccoa men and the replacements, and it's something I saw quite prevalent in the many reunions I attended with the guys. They would tend to group up, and it would be Toccoa men, non-Toccoa men, and then by platoon, which was really interesting, dynamic to see it play. So we're going to move past the pub scene and go to the airfield. I believe it's the airfield scene. Yeah, they get alerted. They go to the airfield. Now, this is a great scene here where Popeye shows up being driven in by Sobel. It was actually Rod Stroll, but Rod is never portrayed in the miniseries, so they have to they basically give what happened to him to Nick Aaron's Popeye character, which is funny because it happens almost the exact same way. Rod had basically skipped out of the hospital. He had been hit in Normandy in Bloody Gulch. He had taken a piece of shrapnel in his behind as he was pulling back from an OP. And he's the one, as he gets back to Allborn, the company's already moved out to the airfield. And Sobel had back acting as the regimental S4. He was indeed looking for the motorcycle that Alton Moore and Don had purloined in Normandy. But what he finds is Rod Stroll wandering around, wondering where everybody is. And he basically says they're at the airfield getting ready to jump. And he's like, if you want to go, I can take you there. If you want to sit it out, I don't think anybody would mind. Well, Rod didn't want to sit it out. He wanted to go with his buddies. So Sobel drove him out to the airfield, and then he pieced together some equipment from everything that was there, and he ends up making the jump. And the funny thing is, he has to either kneel or stand almost the whole entire way because he can't sit down with his wound. But Rod makes the jump. There's another interesting spot where Mike Cudlitz's Randleman character is talking to um, Doug Spain, and he basically tells him how to rig his rifle. And he says we're jumping low, which wasn't correct. Actually, they jumped high. They jumped 1,200 to 1,600 feet was the jump altitude, unlike Normandy, which was fairly low. And it was as they portray it, it's a very clear day when they jump. I actually think there's more clouds in the sky than actually was. I remember Babe telling me that he could see folks coming out of church in San as they were jumping because it was a Sunday jump. One thing that they don't show during the jump sequences is, according to Dick Winters and a number of the other guys that I spoke to over the years, there was gear raining down on the jump field, like helmets, musette bags. Guys were, I don't know why this stuff was coming out. I mean, maybe the prop blast, maybe they didn't secure helmets or whatever. But according to several of the men, there was lots of gear raining down on the drop zone. What they don't show here, which is really interesting, and I didn't see it in any earlier drafts of the episode, was the actual march into San and then towards the bridge, and the bridge gets blown up in their faces. Fans of Band of Brothers and Easy Company will know that from the various histories. If any of you play video games, what's the name of Brothers in Arms, Hell's Highway, they actually depict it. In fact, they have Dale Dye provides the voice for Colonel Sink in it, and it's really interesting because it mimics a lot of what Dick Winters wrote about when he said the bridge blew, and he said the timbers flew up in the air and they look like toothpicks all the way up at altitude. But then by the time they came down, they were reaching terminal velocity and burying themselves into the ground like big spikes. You see that in the video game. I don't know why it wasn't portrayed. I think it was because they thought it would kind of slow down the episode, because then they'd have to deal with the bridging of the Wilhelmina Canal to advance into town. The one thing I will say is there's a melding of incidents in this episode, things that happened north of north of Eindhoven in a small sub-community called Bokt, B-O-K-T. They end up putting them in front of the advance into Neuenen. So it's really a little bit odd. But they spend that first night on the north side of the canal. They don't even make it into the city at first. It's only after bridging efforts, and most of it's just engineers strapping planks to oil drums and making a small pontoon bridge. And there's photographs of this um, around. I think I've even posted some on my Facebook page. I'll put a few of them onto our Patreon page for everybody to take a look at. But anyway, they spend that first evening on the north side of the canal. They finally get across in force on the next day, and then they advance in. And during that advance is when Brewer is hit. And there's an interesting um, episode because, those of you who spent time talking to Al Mampri, well, when Al was with us, Al talked about this episode when Brewer is hit, but there's other accounts of it as well. Buck Taylor told me as he came trotting by with his squad in the middle of this cabbage field, he could see Brewer's bleeding heavily, and he basically said, "Oh, he's had it." And at one point, Burr Smith comes over and actually takes Brewer's watch. And the postscript to that is later on, they're both serving in Laos during the Vietnam War, and Brewer shows up on an inspection tour, and Burr Smith is knocked out because he thought Brewer was dead. Well, he actually had Brewer's watch still, and he went over to his quarters and retrieved the watch and gave it back to him. But he did say that Brewer was pretty frosty about the whole episode. He felt like the whole company had abandoned him in the field. But he was being treated, and he was eventually evac, but not before Al Mampri gets shot in the leg, and Al has to get evacuated as well. So, and none of these things are really kind of correctly portrayed. I mean, they are a little bit, but they're in the wrong place in the wrong time on the wrong day. But they do a good job in showing it occurring. But right now we're going to fast forward past the jumps, the landing, the assembly, and the movement. And this is where they kind of show things kind of getting a little jumbled with their placement. But I do like how they show the assembly, Brewer coming in with the beers, them watching the air power kind of flip away past them as they advance forward. And they show the field advancing into the field and then advancing in the outskirts of Eindhoven. And this would have been the next day. That would have been the 18th. But there's a beautiful work here done on the advance in and the reception by the Dutch people, which is fantastic. I love the bunting and the Dutch flags and American flags. It's great when you see Babe Heffron sitting there waving a flag. Babe got his little cameo. If you don't know he's in there, he's sitting at a table while Talbert's making out with one of the Dutch girls. Great scene with Jimmy Matteo, and the lady with Jimmy's face is perfect. But it's just a great scene. They do a great job. And then they show John Van Koik, which is great. My friend Nettie's dad, he shows up and he starts working with them. And John has a long relationship with the 506, and he works with them all the way through the end of the war. And then eventually emigrates to the United States, becomes a U.S. citizen, and lives outside of Fort Campbell for many years. Colonel Strayer's son, Butch, and his family remained very close friends with the Van Koiks. And I had the opportunity to guide over there with Butch and meet up with Nettie and her husband, rest in peace. We all had a great time, and it was great seeing these old friends link up. But it all kind of starts right here. They do show the accuracy, the shaving of the heads. It's well documented that this was done. And I do, as they're coming out of the town and they show them, now this would have been, Easy doesn't make a beeline to Neuenen. They are actually kind of run around. Most of the units are run around the suburbs of Eindhoven, essentially kind of doing a reconnaissance, looking, because there's reports come in that German forces are advancing towards from the east towards Eindhoven. And there is worry that there's going to be counterattacks. So the units of the 101st, the 506 in particular, are spread out in the suburbs, especially to the east, and they're pushed out to go reconnoiter to find out if German forces are approaching. This is eventually what happens to Easy when they run into German columns in the 107th Panzer Brigade in Neuenen. But we got John meeting up with officers right now. And there's a famous photo from Berchtesgaden of the Second Battalion Command Team sitting around laughing and drinking, and John is kneeling on the left-hand side of the photo. He gets misidentified quite often, but here's another fantastic scene. The Webster and the Dutch child with the chocolate. This one always gets to me. Just a great sequence. Excellent work by Ian Bailey. The expressions on both of them. The wonderment, beautifully done, beautifully acted by both, and the father as well. But the next day they're advancing in Anoying, and here's another scene that I absolutely love, and I got to give a lot of credit to Frankie Mellett, to Alex Sagba Brady, who portrayed Frankie Mellett. Although he never has a speaking role he never says anything, although I think he's singing in the sequence outside of Foix in the miniseries. When he hands off the ration to the Dutch girl, it's beautifully done. Again, no dialogue, but his empathy shows in his performance. His empathy is excellent right here. The way he looks at her, a bit of understanding, a bit of concern, a bit of empathy, hands it off, and then just goes. He's on his mission, but it doesn't stop him from being a human being. And I thought Alex just did a wonderful job with that, and I've told him that on a couple of occasions. Interestingly, though, the majority of the column was actually Sherman's. I don't think there were any Cromwell's. I defer to my buddy Edwin Popkin and Uris to keep me on the straight and narrow at that. I have to go pull the war diaries for the 44th Royal Tank Regiment and take a look at it. I'm pretty sure they're all Sherman's. But here's where Brewer gets hit. This is kind of accurately portrayed. The half track is further into town. This hall should have been outside Eindhoven, not Neuenen. This whole sequence where Brewer gets hit, but the half track engagement does take place on the outskirts of Neuenen. So actually, two medics run up to treat Brewer when they're outside of Eindhoven. One of them is a guy named Holland. He gets his boot heel shot off and he retreats into the ditch. And then Al runs out and treats him. And then Al gets shot in the thigh. And you see, this is Al's character, the character portraying, the gentleman portraying Al getting shot in the leg. And that is accurate. So then they finish up the engagement with the half track. And I'm going to hit the gas a little bit because this is only intended to be about a half an hour. They advance into Neuenen, and the shootout is roughly correct in the way it's portrayed. Great individual performances in here. I love as the Germans counterattack the Garnier and Luz and screaming at Luz to pull back, and they're pulling back. The concern on everybody's faces. They start taking fire. The tanks get hit. Bull pulls back, tries to pull back, but gets cut off. And interestingly, this is a true story. For those of you who know it, it is a true story. The funny thing was, it's not the first bayonet kill that Bill experiences during his time in theater. He actually on D-Day, right after landing, has a bayonet engagement where he kills a German that charges him while he's trying to eat. The writers knew about both of them, and they didn't want to show both. They felt it would have been repetitive, but this one carried a little bit more of the story, and I'm pretty sure that's why Bruce told me this one ended up in the script. But we're gonna chug on through here. A lot of folks don't like the whole sequence with the Johnny Martin character telling the tank commander, there's a tank up there, and then he says no unnecessary destruction of civilian property. Well, those orders were kind of in place, and unfortunately, it may have cost them. But interestingly, they show the Van Klinken when he is killed. According to Pat Christensen, the Germans had a way of sequencing their machine guns and firing high and low, and as they swept left to right. And according to Christensen, if you timed yourself right, you could basically walk between the streams of fire. He said, I wouldn't recommend trying it, but at that point, when they don't show Christensen, he's never portrayed in, well, he is portrayed as Fassbender. When he goes through the bushes, they don't explain that the timing is done, his timing on it. And Van Klinken misgages the timing and he's killed. He's not killed outright. He's shot. He's mortally wounded. They do drag him back and he is treated, but he ends up passing away. I've had the honor of touring through Neuenen with Gary Ann, Van Klinken's great niece, and Gary Ann is a wealth of information on her own right about her family and Robert. And years ago, Robert presented his wings to a Dutch family, and then several years ago, that Dutch family was able to return those wings to Gary Ann, and she has all of his personal effects. And one of my tour groups was able to stand there close to where Robert was killed and examine his wallet and his short snorter. For my viewers who don't know what a short snorter is, it's usually a pound note or a dollar bill that members of the owner's unit sign for him before a mission. And Robert had his short snorter in his wallet and she has his CIB, his combat infantryman's badge, and his jump wings. And she put together a wonderful book about Robert and the family and her connections to the families there in Neuenen, who don't even speak English, but she has been close to them for many years. And it's really a heartwarming story to see how band helped to make something like that happen. Because I don't know if it would have happened if the series didn't come out. But it's a beautiful postscript to the episode. Also, during the pullback, you see Buck Compton getting hit. That sequence is correct. They did leave out a piece where Buck told me once it took 4 guys to get him up into the bed of a truck, and he basically said Lipton made the comment about the 4 holes, and he told Lipton, he said, if I could get up, I'd kill you, which seems so out of character for Buck. But knowing him in later life, and he was much more fatherly and grandfatherly, I'm pretty sure that was well within something he would have said to Lip, because he had a wicked sense of humor. So I don't doubt that was what he said. They also show the deaths of Miller. They don't show Vernon Menzie getting killed, although I had a chance to talk to Brad Freeman. Menzie was a mortarman in the same mortar squad in 2nd Platoon with Brad, and talk about Menzie getting killed. The two had actually cussed at each other as they were pulling back because they were trying to figure out who would go. The Germans had locked in a machine gun during this one alleyway, and Malarkey and Brad and Menzie were there waiting for the machine gun fire to let up, and the two of them were arguing who's going to go after Malarkey. And Malarkey, Don turned around and said, "You two girls can sit here and argue all you want. I'm going." And he ran across. And then Brad said, basically, screw you, Menzie, I'm going. And then he runs across, and then Menzie runs across and gets killed. And Brad said to me that he felt horrible that the last words he had with his friends were him cussing at him, in Brad's words, cussing at him before he was killed. So these are all interesting pieces that are kind of left out, but you can't get every detail right in these. You've only got an hour to work with. And if you were to put in all these little details, you'd have episodes that were 2 hours long, and you can't have that. First of all, you got to keep people's attention. Secondly, the storytelling's got to be sharp. It's got to be paced correctly, and put all these little pieces in there. It just doesn't, it won't work. But it's interesting to know all the details that go in here. Does it ruin watching these episodes? No, not for me. It doesn't. I don't watch them as much as I used to. I love the series, and many of the actors are my friends, and I love watching their performances, and the families and the vets. It goes without saying how close we are. And to me, that's the point of all this, is to watch it and remember all these guys and what they did and what they put up with. Randleman is recovered. He walks part of the way out, and then they do send a patrol back, and he is secured and brought back to the company. So that is correctly portrayed. And it's interesting is the barn no longer exists, but those of you who have traveled to Neuenen and gotten to look around, the barn, what was left of it, the bricks were used to form the memorial to the men that were killed during this action. So when you're there, and it's shaped kind of like a V-shaped memorial, if you're there, those are the bricks that were part of that farmhouse. And the farmhouse is actually across the way from where the memorial is. But yeah, he's eventually recovered, and then they returns to the company. And I'm gonna kind of put a bow on this one, because after this, I'm gonna do another episode, and I think this one's coming in right at a half an hour, which is perfect. It's exactly where I wanted to have it. I just got 3 boxes of materials from Eric Gendronson, the my good friend and executive producer of band. I'll probably do an unboxing video to go with it to show off. A lot of it is the source material that Eric used to do the Bible construction and a bunch of other stuff. He's entrusted it to me to take care of this stuff and I'll do my best to do so. And anyway, thanks everybody for checking in, and I hope you all enjoy this episode. Please make sure you leave comments for me. Again, it's pretty sure I'm just going to do this one for our Patreon subscribers. So you're getting something that everybody else doesn't get. Enjoy.